Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy247 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast.
Good morning and welcome into Vandy247 Live. I'm Billy Derrick alongside Joey Dwyer. We're going to talk a lot of basketball today, talking a little bit of baseball as well. Also be joined by Alaina Morris from Vandy247 as well, talking a little women's hoops as they face Texas tonight, a big game on the road for the women's team. So we'll get a chance to talk about that one and learn about that game tonight. But obviously all of our basketball coverage brought to you by The Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Well, let the laundry professionals at The Wash House take care of that for you. They've got 2 locations in Nashville. Just drop off your dirty laundry, and the professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, and clean laundry, ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. Joey, we've got some basketball to talk about. By the way, Sam says, love the hoodie. The Waffle House hoodie. That's an awesome hoodie, actually.
Billy, people were surprised to see that I was at Cookout. I'm not anything above your normal college student. If you haven't been to Cookout, you're not in college, and if you haven't been to Waffle House, you don't live in Georgia. So I'm a cultured man, if the people didn't know.
Are the Waffle Houses better in Georgia? I feel like they would be.
Oh, they're great. Yeah. I'll tell you a quick Waffle House story before we get to basketball. When I was in high school, it was slammed at after a high school football game, and I was thinking about getting a job. wasn't set on getting a job. My friends told the Waffle House people I wanted to work there though, and so she let me cook my own dinner and all my friends' dinner, and I still had to pay for it. So great Waffle House memory.
Man, so they wanted you. They knew you wanted to work there.
Yeah, I think I still have the arm sleeve, but the hoodie, unfortunately, I had to buy.
That's awesome.
I didn't take them up on the job offer, if you couldn't tell.
No, I could tell. But Waffle House sweatshirts. We've got Vandy football flags at Cookout, which is pretty awesome. But Joey, we got a lot of basketball to get into, and obviously, I want to talk about the matchup with Texas. I think we've beat the Florida game. We've beaten that to a pulp. But with this Texas matchup, and I don't know if you were watching much last night, Texas ended up losing to Arkansas 78-70 at home. But that's a flaming hot Arkansas team that obviously is coming off a win at Kentucky, and then now they go to Texas and win. I would imagine this Texas team is going to be very desperate. But I also know that this is a decent matchup. This is not a bad matchup for Vanderbilt. I was looking at the players positionally. Like Shedrick is a guy that I think McLaughlin can match up decently with. Trey Johnson is a matchup nightmare for anybody, but I do think you could throw Collins on him. You could throw Hogard on him for a little bit. I mean, he's not unguardable, I don't think. Now, maybe at times he is, but Pope is a good guard, but I think they match up well. So that's what I noticed, Joey, that I don't think Vanderbilt will be outmatched like they were against Florida, but Texas is going to certainly be desperate on Saturday, especially because this is their game to try to stay on the right side of the bubble. But same thing for Vanderbilt, right? We're getting a lot of these bubble games now where bubble teams are facing off against each other.
Yeah. I think the dangerous thing about Texas is that that's a loss that might light a fire under them. And it's also a loss that was completely uncharacteristic of Texas. They shot 34% from the field and 27% from three. And Billy, if people have watched Texas, they're not a bad offensive team. Really by any stretch. Trey Johnson went 6 for 22 in that game. When is that ever going to happen again? Probably not much, if at all. I mean, look at the resume before that. Beat LSU by dang near 30 points. I think 30 points on the road. Before that, took Ole Miss to the wire, lost by 3 on the road. Ole Miss just blew the brakes off Kentucky and beat Alabama on the road too earlier in the year. They beat A&M by 1 earlier in the year, or 3 games ago. Beat Mizzou at home before that, and then obviously got blown out by Florida before that. Beat Oklahoma on the road. So if people are thinking this is going to be a pushover game, and just because it's a non-ranked game that Vanderbilt's going to have a significantly better chance, I don't know that I'm fully there. This is a roster with a lot of guys who can do a lot of things and a lot of experience as well. Jordan Pope's an experienced guard. Arthur Kaluma, I feel like, has been around college basketball forever. Tremont Mark was actually better last year and has seen his usage go down this year. People remember him from Arkansas. I had a 40-point game last year at one point. This is a team that has a lot of scoring ability, but like you said, I do think that they're a team that Vanderbilt doesn't match up terribly with. I think they've got better bodies on the wing and at the 4 than Vanderbilt does, but at least at the 5, I don't think Shedrick's a guy who would come in and dominate the game. He's kind of that modern pick and roll Mark Williams type big, to where it's just kind of catching lobs and doing those type of things. I don't know that he's going to be back to the basket, killing you for the whole game. And offensive rebounding wise, they're 192nd in the country. You can live with that. They're probably not going to kill you there. The thing is, they don't turn it over, though. The 13th in turnover percentage in the country. Those are the 2 things I really look at when I look at whether a team matches up well with Vanderbilt. I don't know if that's an awesome matchup, but they certainly have matched up worse with teams, especially in the front court. Billy, I do expect they regress to the mean a little bit shooting-wise, though, because they are not going to do what they did against Arkansas again, no matter how athletic Arkansas is, no matter how much of a fire they had lit under them after that Kentucky game. That's just not going to happen again from Texas. Trey Johnson's not going to shoot 6 for 22 again.
No, I mean he's a really good player. He's a top 10, maybe even top 5 pick in the NBA draft. But I thought you put a good piece out there after the Florida game. I think the headline was sometimes the road just does that, but discouraging trends continue, and there are some trends that are continuing with this basketball team. The biggest one they've got to figure out, and I can't wait to hear from Coach Byington on this tomorrow. What is the plan of attack for the second half defense?
Yeah.
Because, and I don't think that's as simple as, okay, let's trap a little bit more, or let's start full court pressing. Let's play a box and one or whatever. Right. I think in second halves of games, teams, they look at Vanderbilt after the first half, they get to the locker room, they say, okay, they the old line, they had us in the first half, right? But I think they but I think it's sort of like that, Joey. Like the adjustments are there for every team to make against Vanderbilt. And so I don't think it's as simple as Vanderbilt. And now maybe it is. Maybe they make a huge adjustment and they start to clean up the second half defense, but I don't know what they do. I really don't. It's now matchup wise, Texas isn't Florida. They're not Kentucky. They're not Tennessee, but they've got guys that can put the ball in the basket pretty consistently. And if they get hot, look out, especially in the second half. So again, if that second half defense doesn't get cleaned up, this team's not making the tournament. So that's kind of the, push is going to come to shove here eventually, and we'll see what this team's made of.
Yeah, I mean, the last 4 games they've given up 50 plus. In the second half they gave up 60 plus in the Florida game. I don't even think it's as much like effort or teams are just making shots more in the second half. I think Vanderbilt is also getting worn down in the second half a little bit as they start to play some of these teams that have more.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also wonder the non-conference slate. A lot of these teams that they were playing, it wasn't even a game in the second half. So I think there maybe has been some learning curve for them, having to figure out what do you do when you got to play a full game, and they've played a couple of them. But I mean, you look at it, the LSU game I thought was a pretty complete game that they played. Missouri I thought was pretty consistent effort from the first to second half, but Mississippi State, they played one half well. Tennessee, they went on that huge scoring drought late. Alabama, they got down big at one point and then kind of stormed back, so there was a good stretch there. You're still kind of waiting on them to put together a great 40 minutes, and they've been able to get by with a great 35 minutes at times. But even the Kentucky game wasn't a great 40 minutes. They still had some scoring droughts at the end that allowed Kentucky to get up 8 at one point or 7 late in the game. Oklahoma, obviously, the second half was a dumpster fire, and then the Florida game, the second half, not much better than the Oklahoma one. So they've got a lot to work on defensively, and I don't even know how much of that is necessarily fixable just because, man, it's like Byington was talking about in the presser after the Florida game. You can't wear down a guy like Condon. And I think there's a lot of guys on their schedule coming up that you can't necessarily wear down, right? There's Janai Broom on Tuesday, next Saturday in Knoxville. You've got all their bigs, and that they don't necessarily have a star-studded front court, but they're a team that's going to wear you down too. So Vanderbilt's going to have to find some fix to that. And I watched back the Florida game last night in the second half, and it was a two true outcomes type of second half. Florida was getting an open three every time, or was getting an open layup. I saw that. I think it was AJ Hogarth got back cut at one point, and I just thought that completely took the wind out of Vanderbilt sails. And then obviously Florida hit some tough ones, right? Will Richard hit a few tough ones, but I mean, there were just too many open ones in the second half. They shot like 8 for 11 from 3 in the second half. You can't win like that. And I think the 3-point defense is maybe more fixable than the driving defense if they're getting worn down, but I still have my worries about whether that continues. Because, I mean, you look at it, we've seen it 3 straight games now and 4 out of the last 5 games probably. I'll give them some credit for the Alabama game. I thought the second half defense was maybe a little better when you account for pace and you account for kind of how Vanderbilt got itself back into that game. I don't know if there was a bunch of huge Alabama scoring droughts. They still scored 55 points in the second half. But I don't know, Billy. I think that's a question that is it's more difficult to answer than what we can come up with in terms of solutions, but Vanderbilt fans better hope that Mark Byington's got something because that is really plaguing them to this point.
All right, quickly here before we get to baseball, I think they get the win Saturday. I think it's going to be very close. I think, again, both teams are desperate. Ken Palm has it as a 1-point win for Texas. Joey, what do you think happens Saturday?
Yeah, you know what? I'll go with you and predict a Vanderbilt win. I just think they've been so good at home throughout the year. They've only lost 1 game at home, and they beat 2 teams that they had no business beating at home recently. So if they're going to continue that trend, I don't think Texas is a team that's insurmountable or anything along those lines. I am a little worried about the wing size with Kaluma and Mark, and if they get worn down as a result of that. And obviously Trey Johnson's going to do Trey Johnson things, and Texas probably isn't going to turn it over much. But I would like to think that we know enough about this Vanderbilt team to know that they'll respond. And if they come out and get ran off the floor, which I don't expect, I think that tells you maybe something about where they're at mentally right now. But Billy, I expect them to be ready to go, and I expect them to at least be in this game late. And it does feel like a must win in a lot of senses. That's the column that's going up at 5 o'clock today if you want to get on the site at 5 o'clock. But it does feel like a must win in a lot of ways. I think they've got 6 or 7 ranked games in a row after this. They've got 3 regular season games against non-ranked teams left on the schedule. A crazy stat, but this is a make or break game for them on the bubble. Otherwise, you're going to have to go beat a team you have no business beating, and you're probably going to have to do it on the road. So they need this one badly, Billy.
Yeah, and obviously we'll continue to talk about that one. And Joey, of course, his piece coming out later today. We'll be talking to Byington tomorrow, so we'll get those thoughts out there and get his thoughts on Texas. But I want to get into a little bit of baseball. Joey, we are, a little over a week away from the baseball season starting in Phoenix. Vanderbilt will play Grand Canyon, Nebraska, and UC Irvine. They will start that Friday, February 14th. Then Saturday, February 15th. They play 7 o'clock against Nebraska that Saturday. Vandy plays Tennessee in basketball that day as well, earlier that day. So, and then Sunday, February 16th against UC Irvine. So good competition. That's where things will get started. I wanted to go ahead and get a lot of our baseball thoughts out now, and I know we got Alaina Morris coming up here in just a second, talk some women's hoops, but you had an infield piece out a couple of days ago. You got an outfield piece coming out as well, Joey, but it's interesting looking at what this team has this year. It's different than last year, right? You've got returning talent like a Colin Barzey who will be your catcher. I'm interested to see him as the everyday catcher behind the plate defensively. I think he'll be able to hold his own offensively. I'm interested to see him defensively. Vastine would be your shortstop. RJ Austin, likely center fielder. I mean, you would guess. And on the mound, you return J.D. Thompson, who could probably your Friday night guy. Ethan McIlvain needs to have a big year. Mike Mancini is hurt right now, but a big transfer addition from James Madison. Cody Bowker from Georgetown. David Mendez from Dayton as well. And then, you've got Brody Johnston. I think those guys are kind of their core, but you still got some other younger guys, a lot of young pitching as well. As you just look at what this team has this year, Joey, do you feel better about them than you did last year?
I would say so. I'm going through the position previews and everything along those lines. I do feel like they have more talent in their lineup than they've had recently. I'm a little worried about pitching, and I don't know that I'm incredibly worried about pitching. The reviews on Bowker have been tremendous thus far. But I do worry a little bit about if they have enough depth there, because we thought they had enough depth the last 2 years, and it turned out that they didn't. So we'll kind of see there, but it is a big year for Vanderbilt baseball, and I think we're going to do a full preview show next week at some point.
Yep.
We probably should. It's crazy how much it slipped our mind. That tells you how good of a basketball season it's been, right? Because I think last year we were like, man, when can we start doing the baseball preview podcasts? And we did a lot earlier than this year, but it is interesting. Tim Corbin talked with us a couple weeks ago, and even in January was talking about how much he's reinvented himself and has reinvented the program with the younger staff members, with kind of the way he's approached everything. And I think it's got to pay off this year, right? Maybe it's not a make or break year in terms of this program can't get back to where they have been if they don't have a good year this year, but they've had a couple years that didn't meet their standard in a row now, and they've got to get back to Omaha at some point. They've got to get out of a regional at some point. And this is a big, big year for Vanderbilt baseball and for Tim Corbin. I do think he's got a lot of good returners back. Chris Maldonado, I think, is somebody that we have not talked about enough as a media whole. He's a guy who, he hit 310 as a freshman with 8 homers, and obviously got off to a solid start last year as well. But even then, I think was not quite himself at the beginning of last year before he went out with the injury. Man, he's a guy who could be a factor. And then you look at second base, Jaden Davis. I think you know what you're going to get with him, right? He's a guy who's going to put it in play just about every time he gets up. Will hit for average. Vastine, I wonder if there's another leap in there too. He obviously struck out 40 more times than he walked last year, and that's a stat that I think has to be improved if he wants to improve his draft stock. That was big to get him back. Probably the best defender on the team. And then third base, I'm going to guess Brody Johnston gets the nod, but there's a lot in that story. It's for VIPs on the board, so go ahead and read that. There's a lot about kind of what things could look like in terms of the infield positioning, and then we'll talk about the outfield positioning. I think it's supposed to come out today at noon. So it's that time of the year, Billy, and I think it's a big year for Vanderbilt baseball, and one that I do have some optimism that they could be improved in.
Big year for the VandyBoys, and Joe, we'll continue to talk about it. Of course, February 14th is when it all starts. That is Grand Canyon. I feel like they've started seasons against Grand Canyon before. I feel like it's always out there on the West Coast. So
isn't that isn't February 14th Valentine's Day?
I think it is, yeah.
Just brutal.
Big day.
Them. There's going to be a lot of unhappy spouses during that Friday.
Yeah, I heard another joke about that. Like, that's right before a Saturday with a lot of basketball. Like, you have to have some decisions to be made. But Joey, really appreciate you hopping on. Looking forward to seeing the Texas game Saturday and talking more baseball as well. But I'll see you Saturday, and maybe we'll grab some Waffle House that morning.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. I'll see you there.
All right, see you, Joey. That's Joey Dwyer. Obviously, the basketball guru here at Vandy247 does a really good job covering all things Vanderbilt basketball, obviously baseball as well, and football as well. But Joe has a comment, have concern about middle relief and closer. We'll talk more about baseball, but I'm with you, Joe, that their bullpen does concern me a little bit, but we will continue to talk more baseball. But I want to wrap today's show up with a visit from Alaina Morris, our women's basketball writer from right here at Vandy247.com. Alaina, how you doing?
I'm good, Billy. How are you?
I'm good. We've got a big matchup, big test for the women's team tonight against number 4 Texas. Am I correct in that? Number 4, I know there's 6, I think, in the coaches poll, but 4, I want to say, in the AP poll. Tough place to play. Obviously, it's always tough on the road in the SEC. It'll tip off at 8 o'clock on the SEC network. probably the toughest test yet in the SEC. I know they played LSU and lost a close one there, but Texas is a really good team, and they've played really good teams, right? But what are you looking at in this matchup, and what do how do you assess their chances tonight in Austin?
I think the big thing I'm looking at is how they respond from Sunday. Just a loss that to Ole Miss that kind of felt like a punch in the face, and that's a really physical team that just throws everything at you that they have and just makes it really tough on you for 40 minutes. And I think the big thing for them was the effort in that game, and that's something that Shea Ralph talked a lot about after the game, is that the effort wasn't really there until maybe the fourth quarter, and it was a little bit too late then. And so I think I'm just really interested to see how they show up tonight. Last time they lost to Ole Miss pretty bad on the road, they went and played LSU, and like you mentioned, it was a very close game. And I'm not saying it's going to be the same result from Texas, but feels like last time they played Ole Miss, they learned some lessons there, and I'm curious to see how they respond tonight. By all means, not necessarily saying a win, but just kind of how close they keep it, how they respond, just how they approach this game as a whole. I'm really interested to see how that goes.
Well, something that's been really interesting and more so just fun to watch is obviously Michaela Blake's 53 points. I know you weren't down there in Gainesville, but man, that had to have been fun to cover. But her and Camille, I mean, you can't forget about Camille Pierre. They're averaging right there. Michaela's at 22 a game, Pierre's at 21 a game. I mean, you've got to look at them and say they could be one of the better duos in the SEC. I mean, that in a lot of games they're the ones scoring. But I'm interested. I mean, from your experience, have you seen a player quite like Michaela Blake's? I know Camille Pierre and Ayanna Moore and some other players, support this team. But man, it'd be interesting to see where this team would be without Michaela Blake's.
I have not seen anybody like Michaela, especially as a freshman. I think just what impresses me so much is the ability she has to score any way she wants to. Her first step, I mean, it's so hard to guard for anybody. She's so quick and gets to the basket with ease, and that's how she got a lot of her points versus Florida. I mean, 53 points, but only hit 5 3-pointers. That just tells you how much she was scoring inside the arc, and so that's what's really impressed me. But I think that the way she's able to score, too, she's a three-way scorer. I mean, can shoot from three, things like that. And what impresses me, too, is she's put on the Ann Myers-Drysdale midseason top 10 watch list, and that goes to the nation's best shooting guard. And Michaela's the only freshman on that list and being considered for that award. And I think that just to be able to have that recognition as a freshman too, when you're shooting 47% from the field in the SEC, 34% from three, and 85% from the free throw line, just being able to do that at such a young age is really impressive. And something too that Shea talked about is she thought there would be a little bit more of an adjustment period, because that happens with all freshmen. We see them come into college and struggle with things because, they're facing a whole new level of competition. But she feels that Michaela really hasn't had too much of an adjustment period yet. And obviously that's a really good thing for Vanderbilt. But I've never seen a freshman be able to score the way she did, especially in that 53-point game against Florida.
All right. Last thing before I let you go, Alaina, it's interesting looking at last year's NCAA tournament. Obviously, Vanderbilt snuck in as a 12 seed, lost to Baylor, but they played in that first 4 game. I'm forgetting who they played against in that game. I know you know. Last year. Columbia, right. Okay, so they played Columbia in the first 4 game, ended up playing the 5 seed Baylor, lost. This year, they're tracking right now as a 6 seed. What are the chances they stay on the 6 seed line in your mind, right? With the schedule ahead, what are the chances they stay on the 6 seed line as opposed to falling back to maybe closer to an 8 or a 9?
I think they can sit right around a 6 or a 7. Just kind of going forward, it feels like their games are a little bit more chalk. They play South Carolina and Texas, which are 2 top 5 teams in the country. So you have to imagine those are not going to go the way that they might want. Every other game feels like Vanderbilt should be favored except for Oklahoma. I think that's the one game you might be able to flip a coin and see who wins that one. It's on the road, so it will make it a little bit tougher. But because I think the rest of their schedule is a little bit more predictable than the first half of conference play, I think that they have the ability and they know what's ahead just to be able to sustain that 6 seed, maybe 7. But I can't really see them dropping to an 8 or 9 unless, some of these toss-up games or maybe games they were favored don't go the way they're supposed to. I think Mississippi State might be able to threaten that a little bit. Oklahoma, but there are not a lot of games left like your Ole Misses, your Alabamas, your Tennessees, where it could go either way. It feels like it's kind of all up to Vanderbilt now how they want to play out the rest of the season.
Man, it's interesting looking at the first part of their schedule. You had to play number 16 Kentucky, number 4 LSU, number 15 Tennessee, number 19 Alabama, and of course here with number 4 Texas. But down the stretch, no ranked teams. Not saying they're not going to be, they're not going to be tough, but manageable here down the stretch for Shea Ralph and company with the SEC Women's Tournament coming up March 5th. So here in about a month, it'll be interesting to see what they're seeded there. But Alaina, I really appreciate it. Good luck with your coverage tonight, and thanks for checking in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Billy.
All right, that's Alaina Morris, women's basketball writer here at Vandy247.com. Does a really good job covering Shea Ralph and company. Big one tonight against Texas. 8 o'clock in the SEC Network. If you want to check that one out, that's the number 4 team in the country. So they're gonna be tested certainly tonight. And then Saturday, Vanderbilt in Texas, noon. That'll be on SEC Network as well. So I would definitely arrive early if you plan on going to the game. Get there early, get to your parking spot early, and make sure you got enough time to get settled and get into the game. But really appreciate everybody hopping in today. I know it was a shorter episode, but we got some good episodes in this week. Next week, I'm looking at some big episodes. Of course, we'll talk a lot of basketball, talk about the Texas game, the Auburn game on Tuesday, and then baseball coming up next weekend. So for Joey Dwyer and Alaina Morris, I'm Billy Derrick. Thanks to them for joining. Thanks to all of you for watching or listening after the fact. Give us a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That helps us get noticed. If you're interested and haven't subscribed to Vandy247.com yet, please do. We've got great deals going on right now. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you're watching right now. Like this video. Throw a comment in there. We'd love to have the interaction. Also, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of Vandy 24/7 Live.